Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 2 of the CDL podcast with your host, Ryan. And today we are going to get into my overall reactions from CDL LA, as well as some power rankings I have following the event, the current standings, some roster change possible news, and some things that I think should happen in terms of roster changes, as well as just reviewing the matches that happened, and also looking at how my predictions were from before the event that I made on the first podcast. So first of all, I want to start by thanking you guys for the support on the first podcast. It was only uploaded to YouTube and then later to SoundCloud, but the support it got on YouTube was actually better than I thought. It would be off the break because, as I stated in the first one, I haven't been a content creator in this scene at all before, so I obviously don't have a huge following in it, and I'm just trying to make a name for myself and do something I enjoy. And you guys really showed a lot of support in the first YouTube video. It got more watch time and views and overall interaction than I expected it to, and I really want to thank you guys for that and hope you keep the support coming. So first, to get into today's episode of the podcast, I wanted to maybe look real briefly at my predictions to see how I did for this event. And actually, I did pretty well. I made some kind of surprise picks when I was picking my bracket, and they actually panned out. I didn't predict perfectly how the four teams would get to the semifinals, but I did predict the four teams correctly. I picked Minnesota, OGLA, Atlanta, and Dallas to make to the semifinals, and those were the four teams that actually ended up making it to the semifinals. However, I did pick Minnesota to beat OGLA in the qualifying round in winners, so they would come out as the winner of Group A, and they actually didn't. OGLA did that, but they both ended up coming out, so I got those correct. And then I got Group B actually perfectly correct, I believe, because I picked Dallas over New York, Atlanta over Florida, and then Florida over New York. I picked everything right, and I'm looking at the bracket right now. I picked everything in Group B right, and then obviously I was thinking about going with Minnesota, as you saw in the first podcast, but I actually ended up going with Atlanta over Minnesota, making the safe pick, and I should have just went with my gut and went for the bold pick and went with Minnesota over Atlanta, and then I would have been good. Or I believe I had maybe OGLA versus Atlanta in the semis, and then I picked, obviously, Atlanta to beat them. I can't remember, but I really wanted to pick Minnesota to get to the finals, and I didn't. But I didn't end up picking a Dallas versus Atlanta final, so I was close. And then I picked, I believe, Atlanta to win it all because that was a safe pick, and that was obviously wrong. But if I was going to pick anybody else to win the event, I was going to go kind of off base and pick Minnesota. So, I probably wouldn't have picked Dallas. They'd have been like my third choice for a winner for the event. So I was wrong on that, but not too surprised to see them win. But before we get too far into that, I kind of want to just go over each individual match, and I'll focus more on like probably the later matches and the overall better ones, but I just kind of wanted to give each one a quick touch just to see what we saw in those matches. So I'm just going to go, I can't remember the order in which they were played, but I'm just going to go down the bracket in terms of the top match in Group A, then to B, and then go to losers, and then go from there. So the first match on the bracket here in winners round 1 in Group A is Minnesota versus Seattle, and this was more of a lopsided matchup like you'd expect. GodRx was an absolute beast on the map in this match, and they handled Seattle pretty easily 3-1. I can't remember which map Minnesota dropped, but they handled them pretty easy like anyone would expect that's been watching. I mean, if you look at the rosters, you may expect Seattle to win because of the storied names, but Minnesota handled them pretty easily, so we won't go too deep into that one. And then the second match in Group A that is listed here is the LA Gorillas versus OGLA, which I predicted OGLA to win that one, and I thought they'd win it decently easy, but it actually ended up being a very close match, and OGLA could have very easily lost it, as I believe they reverse swept the LA Gorillas. But in that match, it looked very rough for OGLA after they dropped the first two maps, and it looked like they were on their way to yet another series loss and another losers round 1 where they would probably lose again like they always have. But they, after Vivid, I can't remember if it was Vivid or Spark, gave the choke sign across the stage to them, and they were all yelling. OGLA turned it around and ended up winning that match, and I think that was the start of something special. The LA Gorillas roster looked like it was a very good roster change after those first two maps. Started 2-0, started hot. A lot of talent on that team, but they just kind of crumbled under the moment, and the veterans of OGLA stayed composed and were able to pull off the reverse sweep. So OGLA was able to win that one. And then before going into the losers, let's just go over Group A overall, and then we'll go straight to Group B actually. So then the losers round one matchup in Group A was Seattle Surge versus the LA Gorillas, and the LA Gorillas, after being reverse swept, were pretty much down and out, I believe, in their mindset, because it's a bunch of younger players that probably don't have a strong mindset yet and haven't played on this stage with Vivid and Spart, and I guess Blast has a little bit, but overall they're a young team. Decimate isn't too experienced in the scene either, really. So yeah, we saw Seattle Surge 3-0 the LA Gorillas. Kind of as I would expect. The Seattle Surge are just overall better team, more experience in that losers type of situation, that I expect them to stay more composed and get that win. So yeah, it was a pretty easy 3-0, which unfortunately we saw a lot of 3-0s this weekend, which led to not as interesting of series, but then Sunday really ramped up and made me very excited for the rest of the year. So then moving on to the qualifying round in winners, we had Minnesota versus OGLA. And looking at this match, it's the match that I predicted would happen in the qualifying round in winners, and I thought Minnesota was going to handle OGLA pretty easily, because like my bold prediction was going into this event, OGLA is going to look a lot better. And I thought it was because of the role change of Dashi that they would look a lot better, and I think I was right on that. Obviously he struggled in that elimination match where they were knocked out in the semis, but I think that role change helped a lot, having Dashi with a do-it-all gun like he did last year with the Maddox, and then this year's do-it-all gun is really the MP5. It can do it all from every range, and honestly oftentimes outguns the M4 from long range, and having Dashi on that do-it-all really helped, and it showed in this series versus Minnesota. The whole team played better. I think Slasher on the main AR, where he's more comfortable rather than running around with an MP5, was good, because we haven't seen Slasher in a main AR role in quite some time, actually, because last year on 100 Thieves with Octane on his team, he wasn't the main AR either. He was using the Maddox the entire year while Slasher used the ICR. So it's been really since World War II that we've truly seen Slasher on the main AR. And it was good to see, and OGLA looked very improved, and they were able to handle Minnesota very, very easily, actually 3-0. So then the qualifying round in losers was Minnesota versus Seattle, and like we all expected, Minnesota absolutely mopped the floor with them. Again, like they did 3-1 in the first round, this time it was 3-0. GodRx had his way on the map again, and they double bopped Seattle Surge right out of the tournament, 3-0, to make Minnesota and OGLA come out of that group. So on to Group B. The first match listed here is the Atlanta FaZe versus Florida Mutineers. This was a quick hot 3-0 with Pharaoh filling in for Pristini because of whatever issues he has going on. I don't want to obviously speak on this incorrectly, but I believe it was some kind of mental health thing was going on. He was struggling with something, and obviously that's something serious, and I don't want to misrepresent what it was, but that's obviously something serious, and he's more than welcome to take time off for that, and I really hope that gets better for him, because it's obviously something you don't want to see anybody struggle with, no matter who it is, and also because Pristini is a great person for this scene. The storyline with him and Arcides playing each other is a great one. He's a great, fantastic world champion player. He clearly makes Florida a better team, as they were able to make the finals the last event with him, so we just want to see him back healthy and just in the right state of mind, so I'm hoping for the best for him. He's a great player, seems like a great guy, and great for the scene. But Atlanta FaZe was very easily able to 3-0 Florida Mutineers here to move on to the qualifying round of winners. And the next match we had was the Dallas Empire versus New York Subliners. Honestly, in this match, I was surprised that New York got a map, because in this series, Happy just kind of looked overwhelmed. He hasn't played on a pro level since Black Ops 3, and he's a solid player, but not playing on a pro level since Black Ops 3, which was 4 or 5 years ago, that's a long time to not play on a world stage, a big stage like that, a franchise league, and I think he was just a little overwhelmed, and he just isn't as caught up as you need to be, and I'm surprised they got a map, but Dallas was very easily able to 3-1 them. So going down to losers round 1 in Group B, we had Florida versus the New York Subliners, and like we all expected, once again, Florida was able to take this pretty easily, and Farrell looked very good in this series. Farrell looked very good all weekend. But the struggles for New York continued. They are just a mess right now, and when we get into a later segment talking about roster changes and maybe what I think should happen and power rankings and stuff. We'll get into them more. That's why overall I'm not diving too deep into teams. If you're wondering why I'm not analyzing a team more, it's because later on in the podcast I'm gonna go over the power rankings and the current standings, and then when I go over that, I'm really gonna dive more into the teams, and then also I'm gonna talk about maybe roster changes that are rumored right now and ones that I think should happen, and then I'll dive more into these teams, their team comp, their possible roster changes, and more detail on them if that's what you're looking for. So yeah, Florida was able to take this one 3-1 and move on and eliminate New York. With them only winning 2 maps, their struggles continued. Then going on to the qualifying round winners, we had Atlanta FaZe versus Dallas Empire. I believe I predicted this one to be like a 3-0, 3-1 type of series, and it was a hot 3-0. Dallas was able to keep some of the maps pretty close, but Atlanta was just too talented for them, and they won 3-0, knocking Dallas to the qualifying round losers. In this round, it was Dallas versus Florida, and Dallas was able to handle them pretty easily, 3-0, and that's not really what I expected because Florida made it to the final last event, and I think Florida is a solid middle-of-the-road team that can get hot and do damage with players like Skies, who are extremely talented, and Farah, who I've always been very high on. But without Pristini, I think they probably had limited practice, and Dallas is obviously a very good team, as we saw from this event, and they were able to take advantage of Florida maybe being underprepared, and it's not underprepared because they didn't try to be prepared. It was just they had a substitute with Pristini's whole situation and probably just didn't have the time to practice, and that probably caught up to them against a very disciplined team with leaders like Crim6 and Clayster. All right, so moving on to the semifinals. In the top half of the bracket, we had the qualifying winner out of Group A and the second place team out of Group B. The winner was OGLA, and the second place team out of Group B was Dallas Empire. So I believe I had these two teams in the semifinals for my predictions in the last podcast, but I didn't have them playing each other. But I think, as everybody would expect, Dallas Empire was able to get this win, although OGLA really blew some maps in this series that they could have won. I believe the Dom, they really choked it at the end, and then that fourth hardpoint, I think they really choked at the end too. They were really close maps. OGLA could have very easily taken this series 3-1 if they would have won those close maps. But I think OGLA really impressed here. I think the main takeaway from people is going to be Dallas Empire won this, but they were expected to win it nonetheless. But I think my main takeaway is going to be that OGLA could have very easily won this series, which is something we couldn't say about a lot of their series early in the year, and they could have very easily been playing in a final after having not won a match at all coming into this event. And we'll get into that a little bit more later about what that means to the team and what I think it means, but Dallas was able to take this one 3-1 in a very close series, and I think that bodes well for OGLA, as weird as that sounds, but they played very well. All right, and moving on to the lower bracket semifinal, we had Atlanta FaZe versus Minnesota ROKKR. And now this was one of the best series. This is the series that maybe we'll talk a little bit more about instead of kind of rushing through them like I have been the other ones. But this series was a great series. Arguably, maybe not even arguably, maybe it definitively is the best series we've seen so far this year. I don't think it's the two best teams. I don't think anybody would say that. I think everybody would still put Chicago and FaZe as the two best teams. But Minnesota, there's something about them. I saw Maven tweeting about it. I'm a huge Maven fan, Hardpoints fan, all that. And I saw Maven tweeting about it, and he said that I think it was Atlanta FaZe has a record of something like 26-7, 28-7. I can't remember it exactly. But I know they had 7 losses on land so far this year, and 5 are to the Minnesota ROKKR, because this series Minnesota won 3-2, and the previous time they played in Atlanta, Minnesota was reverse swept, and Atlanta won 3-2. So that's 5 losses that Minnesota has handed Atlanta. And I mean, clearly when you look at the teams on paper, Atlanta's more talented than them because they're probably more talented than every team. But something about Minnesota just allows them to play Atlanta FaZe very tight, and I don't know how to pinpoint exactly. That's what Maven was saying. He doesn't know how to pinpoint it because the talent is clearly higher on Atlanta, but I don't think it's as high as everybody really thinks that it is in comparison. Obviously, they're the most talented team, but I think Minnesota is very underrated talent-wise. I think you've got players like Asim, who are supremely talented, play super, super fast to match the pace of FaZe, which is something that a lot of teams don't have. A lot of teams aren't able to match their pace. I think you've got a player like Asim who maybe isn't as skilled as guys like Abizi and Simp on the submachine gun, but he plays so fast that he's able to keep up with their pace, and maybe they're not used to playing something like that. And same with Alex. Alex on the submachine gun is another very fast player who looks like probably a top 10 player in this game right now. He looks insane. And then you've got another guy like Silly, who isn't maybe a super fast player. He's actually probably a little bit slower for an SMG standards, but he's such a solid player. He's never going to go super negative. He's also probably never going to go like super positive, but he's always going to be around that 1 KD playing the objective. And he's a super smart player, and I think he's probably like an IGL, an in-game leader for this team. And he's another really solid player. And then you look at their other like submachine gun player that they have there, and I'm blanking on who it is right now. I guess GodRx. Yeah, I guess GodRx is like their other submachine gun. He's kind of a flex, but he's an absolute superstar, probably the best player on their team. I think he's still being underrated a bit because clearly this team, I mean, if Asim is a very good player, but not a superstar, and you're not considering Silly a superstar, and you're considering Alex on the edge of that top 10 and a really good player, but maybe not a superstar, if they're beating a team like Atlanta FaZe, you'd have to call one of them a superstar, and it's got to be GodRx. I think he's not getting enough top 5 player in the game talk right now because I think he might be one. That's maybe a hot take, but I think a lot of people would have to agree with that. They've been in the semifinal consistently. They went 2-0 on launch weekend. They're a very good team. And then you've got Assault, who isn't maybe a top AR, but he's a staple in the AR. He's a COD Champs MVP, a world champion. He's a solid AR. So toe-to-toe, I think they can go with FaZe, and I think that Minnesota can play really slow and methodical with guys like Silly and Assault, but I think with guys like Asim and Alex and GodRx, they can also play really fast, and they're able to be a smart team that's probably well coached by Brian Saint that can switch up their pace, which is something that we don't usually see in Call of Duty. It seems like teams like Atlanta have one speed. It's go, 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 go. Or you see teams in the past, like I'm not sure if there's a team I could say this year because I guess this game is really kind of fast. We don't know as much. And you can correct me and comment if I'm wrong, if you can think of a team that's just a really slow, methodical team. Maybe Toronto, I'm not sure. But a team like United in the past where they had pacing issues where Clay is a slower player and Arcides is a slower player. And then you've got guys like Pristini and who was it in the past? Silly, who are Pristini's really fast, but Silly's slow, and they're kind of just an overall slower team. No, Minnesota has both identities. They can be a slow team and they can be a fast team. I think that maybe that screwed FaZe up, and they were maybe they're the best studied team. I think kind of like a Gen G from last year is what they remind me of. Maybe with a little bit more talent, with the comp of Envoy and GodRx kind of being the superstar of each team. I think they're maybe the smartest team in the game, and they're up there. They're well learned, but they also have the talent. And I think maybe that just got to FaZe in this series, and they were actually able to take them down 3-2. Which was probably the best series of the weekend and made me really look forward to this matchup more because Minnesota is probably the 4th best team, and if they're playing like this against FaZe, it makes me really excited for where the league could come this year. All right, and then going into our grand final, it was the Dallas Empire versus the Minnesota ROKKR, which nobody expected. I mean, these teams aren't shockers that they were in the finals, but everybody expected FaZe to be there. Excuse me, I needed a drink of water. But I think that this series started off, and I was watching it with my roommate, and it was like, okay, here we go, Dallas up 2-0. Minnesota just looks maybe like they used all their gas in that match versus FaZe because that was almost maybe essentially a final for them, being able to be the first team that takes down FaZe. But they actually were able to bounce back, and they were able to win the, the domination. I can't remember exactly how the domination went for them. I think it was kind of a blowout. I can't really remember exactly, but I know that they were able to take that one, and then the hard point was a crazy map that they were able to take, and then it got to a game 5, and Dallas kind of dominated the game 5. They were able to take it, I believe it was 6-2, maybe 6-3, and it was over decently quick because they got up like a 4-1 round count, and we're just overall handling the map pretty well. And from there on out, Dallas, they just handled that S&D. It was pretty much over. Clay played very well, and unfortunately they didn't give out an MVP, and I guess they did give out a trophy, but I saw something from like the CDL Intel page that they were unable to show the trophy on broadcast. I'm not sure for what reason, since they did show it in Atlanta with like the peaches and everything that were there. They did show that, but they weren't able to show it in LA for whatever reason. But I saw a lot of people saying that the MVP was probably probably Clayster, and I would probably agree with that. It's probably Clayster or maybe Hook. And I think Hook probably would have gotten it if it were on broadcast. Maybe he wouldn't deserve it as much, but I think the whole talk behind Hook being a multi FPS champion now and waiting so long while being so talented before winning his first event in COD, I think that they might give it to him just for the storylines, because Call of Duty is, in fact, usually always about the storylines. So Hook maybe would have gotten it, but yeah, I think Twitter's overall consensus is Clay was the MVP, and that's kind of cool to see because Clayster hasn't really been in that MVP conversation in a long time. His teams won last year, but obviously Simp, Abizi, Arcides, those guys were more the MVP talk. But it's cool to see Clay in that MVP talk, even if he wasn't maybe your MVP. He's definitely up there in the talks on that team over guys like Crim6 and Illy. Shotzi had a really good bounce back weekend. That was really good to see from him. I'm not a huge Empire fan, if you couldn't tell. I'm not a big Crim6 fan. Clay's all right. Shotzi and Illy. I used to be a big Halo guy, so I kind of like guys like Shotzi and Hook. I am a pretty big Hook fan, so I was really happy to see him win. But I think overall that team is pretty scary. They've kind of, I don't want to say flown under the radar because we all know they're good, but by the community, because I think the community hates Crim6 so much that I think they've kind of been, flying under the radar for the community because people just love to hate on Crim6. And since they were being beat by Chicago and Atlanta, they were kind of getting destroyed by the community, and people were saying that they were trash. But I mean, this is their second final, their first win. They really only lost to teams like Atlanta and Chicago, who we consider the top two. So you've got to put them up there in your top three, and they're a really good team. Glad to see them win. Glad to see Hook, Illy, Shotzi get their first win. Glad to see Crim6 back on top. Nice to see him win without the old Optic boys to prove he can still do it. And also nice to see Clayster back on that championship form like he was last year. But that's going to do it for the bracket. I went a little longer into that than I wanted to, but I kind of got caught up talking about this stuff like I always do. But then that's about it for that, yeah. And then I wanted to just really quickly read off the CDL point standings if you guys were unable to see that, so we kind of know where all the teams stand right now. I'm going to pull it up here. I think I saw a tweet from the CDL. Yeah, so here are the current standings. We've got FaZe and Hunstmen tied at 1 with 90 CDL points. Atlanta missed a big chance to really hop ahead if they would have been able to get to the final and win. By the way, these are all with 3 events played by each team. So it's not like 2 events for a team, 1 event for another team, 3 for another like it used to be. No, all the teams are actually at an even number of events now. So this is a true test of where we all stand because I believe it's top 8 make playoffs. And then at 3, we've got the Dallas Empire with 80. They had a huge weekend gaining 50 points. Then we got the ROKKR with 70 in 4th, gaining 30 points this weekend. Another huge week for them. The Mutineers gained 10 points. They're tied for 5th with 50. And then the Paris Legion also have 50. Obviously didn't gain anything this weekend because they didn't play. London Royal Ravens at 7, and they're at 40. And obviously, once again, didn't gain any points this weekend because they didn't play. Then a new team up a little bit in the standings, tied for 8th. OGLA, they were able to get their first 20 points this weekend. Also tied with them for 8th are the Seattle Surge, who were able to rack up 10 points this weekend. And then tied for the last spot in the standings, the LA Gorillas, who played this weekend but were unable to get any points. The New York Subliners, who also played this weekend and were unable to gain any points. And then the Toronto Ultra with 10 points, just like the Subliners and Gorillas. And they obviously did not gain any points this weekend because they did not play. So there are our standings right now. That would make the Atlanta FaZe, Chicago Huntsmen, Dallas Empire, ROKKR, Mutineers, Legion, and Royal Ravens are playoff teams right now. And then the Surge and OGLA are tied for that last playoff spot. I'm not sure how that'll work. I think maybe there's some kind of a wildcard plan for 7 and 8. I can't remember. I'd have to go look at that again, but I'm not sure where to find that right now. They haven't done too great of a detail on the league's format. All right, and then I think the next thing I wanted to dive into was the current power rankings that I have for the teams. I think my power rankings are probably going to be very similar to what most of yours are. Maybe a few teams switched around, but I think they're probably pretty similar. At number 1, I still have to go with Atlanta FaZe. I still think they're probably the best team in the game. Minnesota had to give it everything, plus some crazy comebacks. I mean, let's be honest. this was any other Call of Duty, that game 4 hardpoint, Atlanta FaZe is winning that because Celium goes into that, I think it was P4, I can't remember, that long hallway with the heady on Ramaza in that map 4, and Celium flies into that hill, and talk about a play that gave you chills with the commentating. That was one of the most insane plays I've ever seen. Celium was able to get in. I believe he got a 3-piece and then looked at the back entrance to it and picked up a 4-piece. And in any other COD, when it's like a 230 situation, and you fly in and make a crazy play like Celium did with MP5, and he picks up a 4-piece, any other COD, they're spawning out, and that's a win for your team. You just wiped the team, basically, because I think somebody else on his team picked up the 5th kill. They basically 5-wiped them, were able to gain control of the hill, and that hill is basically in the back of the map, so the other team should spawn out, and you should be able to get that last 20 seconds, roughly, and you should win the map. But, of course, in Modern Warfare, Minnesota was able to still continue spawning in the back, somehow, of that hill, so they were able to constantly flood, get some contests in, and only allow FaZe to get to like 247. And I think FaZe hopped out of the hill when there was like 3 seconds on it, and they were at 247. They might have stopped at 249. I'm sure we would have heard more about it if they would have gotten to 250 off it, but it looked very close, like they could have maybe gotten to 250. But yeah, Celium made a crazy play. They probably should have won that map, making them probably win the series, and then probably 3-0ing Dallas Empire like they always do in the finals. So I've got to keep FaZe at 1 until we maybe see them lose early in another event. Then maybe we can start to talk about it. But the team that would probably overtake them would be Chicago, and they weren't here this weekend. And the last time we saw them, they looked a bit shaky, so we can't move them over them. Then in my number 2 spot, I have the Chicago Huntsmen. No shock there. They had a rough event the last time we saw them play, but they weren't able to showcase that they've gotten better, so we can't put them over FaZe because they didn't play this weekend. But they're a very solid team. Seems like they have good vibes. Who knows how long that'll last with Gunless's history, but they seem to have good vibes. They're probably the best run organization in the league. They obviously have the biggest following with Hex, Scump, Formal, those guys. And they seem to be a very solid team. Probably the second best. So I have to keep them at 2. And then in my 3 and 4 spot, I struggled a lot more than you would probably think I did, because it seems like, okay, well, if you're not going to put Dallas Empire at 1 or 2, you've got to put them at 3 because they're the other event winner. Chicago's won an event, Atlanta's won an event, and Dallas has won an event, so you've got to put them at 3. But as weird as this sounds, I told you guys last time in the last podcast, I'm very, very, very high on the Minnesota team. I struggled to not put them at 3 because I really think Minnesota, with the way they beat FaZe and the way that they've really fought with FaZe, both their series have been 5-game series with FaZe. I really wanted to put Minnesota at 3, but Dallas did beat them in a final, so it's hard to put them ahead of Dallas. You know what? Screw it. I'm going to put Minnesota at 3. I have my list here that Dallas is at 3, but I'm going to put Minnesota at 3, and I'm going to tell you why. Dallas obviously won the event. They beat Minnesota. Yes, head-to-head, they're probably better than Minnesota, but we've seen Minnesota against teams. I can't remember. Has Minnesota played Chicago? I don't think they have. I can't remember. I don't think they have. But we see teams like Chicago, or like Minnesota, I'm sorry, who have played Atlanta twice, 3-2 both times, and they've been very close series. Every time we see Dallas play Chicago or Atlanta, it's a 3-0 in favor of Atlanta or Chicago, or a 3-1 in favor of Atlanta and Chicago, and Dallas gets dominated by those top 2 teams. But when Minnesota plays Atlanta, they've beaten them, the only team to do that, and also they've almost beaten them, and they took a reverse sweep for them to not get that win. So they could easily be 2-0 against Atlanta, who we all unanimously consider the best team in the game. So for this reason, I think that Minnesota on any given time can beat any top team. Like if Minnesota were to go in and beat Chicago, or to beat Atlanta like they did, or Dallas, who we consider 3 of the top 4 teams, I wouldn't be shocked. But if Dallas is matching up with Chicago or Atlanta right now, I'm easily picking Chicago or Atlanta, and it's 3-1 or 3-0. So for that reason, and that weird logic, even though Dallas beat them, doesn't always mean that they're the better team. They could have gotten the better of them at that time, and they almost were able to reverse sweep them. So for some odd reason, and to be a little controversial, I'm actually going to go with the Minnesota ROKKR as my 3 team. And then that obviously means Dallas Empire is going to be my 4th team. And I think obviously you can interchange these two. I'm not saying that like my power rankings are definitive and Minnesota's a lot better than Dallas. They're interchangeable. Should I probably put Dallas at 3? Yeah. But to be a little different, I'm going to put Minnesota at 3, Dallas at 4. I gave you the explanation for both, so I don't need to go into that further. then this is where I think the power rankings are honestly more interesting, because 1 through 4, everybody's got Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, and Minnesota. Unless you're a little bit crazy, you've got those 4 in the top 4, and it's just a matter of how you arrange them. I think we can all agree on that. And me putting Minnesota ahead of Dallas 3 and 4 really doesn't mean anything. I think Dallas could beat them on any given day, and I think Minnesota could beat Dallas on any given day, and that's why I kind of flip them, because I just think Minnesota would maybe beat them more on any given day. But then we get to 5. This is going to be a little controversial for most of you. I was high on them before the last event, and I'm putting OGLA in the 5 spot. Now, you might think this is way too premature, and it might be stupid, and quite honestly, it could be stupid. But I think that OGLA in the 5 spot showed me enough to believe that they could hop into the top 4 very soon. And when I'm ranking a power rankings, I'm kind of looking at who I think has the most potential when I get into this 5 to 8 range, because the 5 to 8 range is pretty solidified on who our top 8 teams are. And then you've got teams like Florida in that range who made a final. Teams like London in that range who were in the semifinal, up 2-0 on Dallas in London and could have easily made it. So all these teams could make a run to the finals. It's just who I think has the most talent to consistently make that run. And I like to rate a lot on potential, because I grew up a Milwaukee Bucks fan, and it seemed like they had potential for 15 years of my life and were never really able to make the playoffs. So I kind of give potential a leg up, and maybe that's my sports fan background, but I think OGLA has the most potential, and I don't really think anybody could argue me on that. I think they have way more potential than Paris or Florida. They could also have way more downs than teams like Paris or Florida, but I think OGLA has higher potential with players like Dashy and Slasher and Kenny. They have so much talent that I think their ceiling to maybe get a tournament win is higher than the other teams in this range, and I think Dashy switching to that MP5, like I touched on earlier, is so important. I think it is so important because it's a do-it-all gun. And I know Dashy likes to say he's a main AR, but last year he wasn't the main AR. Krim was on the Optic team, and Dashy was an absolute fiend on the Maddox, which is like a flex do-it-all gun. This year he was trying to play the main AR. Well, he's obviously a great main AR. He'd be great in any role he wanted to play. SMG, main AR, flex, whatever he wanted to play, he'd be great. But I think with a do-it-all weapon, he's even better, because this allows him to just run around the map and just get kills and not think as much, where Slasher is more of an intelligent player, a main AR, more methodical, and he can kind of direct the troops from this position rather than being up in everybody's face and making plays with an MP5. But then he also has to make all the calls, because I'm sure he's the in-game leader for this team along with Cap. And then Slasher's doing way too much, where if he can sit back, play a little more slow with a main AR, he can make the calls better, and maybe this team gets a lot better. So I'm putting them at 5, and I think by the end of the next event, I think they're at the next event, correct? I can't remember if they are, but whatever their next event that they're at is, I think by the end of that event, we may hop them into that top 4 instead of Minnesota or Dallas, or maybe even Chicago if they keep struggling. I don't think Atlanta, though. All right. So then coming in at number 6, once again, this is where it gets kind of muddy, because this is a bunch of pretty even teams, 6 through 8 here. We have the London Royal Ravens for me. Now, the reason I'm putting them ahead of Florida and Paris is because, once again, the potential thing. I think Wuskin and Scraps are great players. Wuskin on the M4 looks like a top main AR this year. Scraps is a great player. I think Dylan is a fantastic player. He's really struggled this year, though, so if he doesn't come around, they may have to drop down my power rankings, but he is a great player, as we saw in Black Ops 4, an absolute phenom, possibly a generational talent if we continue to see consistency from him, if he can bring it up this year like he was in Black Ops 4. And then Jerd, an all-time great in Europe, King Jerd, the Scump of Europe. And then Rated, who we'll get into Rated and my thoughts on him a little bit later, but I think London has a lot of potential, so I put them at 6. Then at 7, another team that could be interchangeable with 5 or 6, like I said, I put Florida. And I think I put Florida all the way down at 7, even though they've been to a grand final, simply because I don't know if I ever see them getting back to a grand final, but I also don't see them being a team that's constantly being knocked out early. I see them getting out of their group a lot and losing in the semifinals. I think they're like that top 4 to top 6 team. So that's why I have them at 7. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense if I think they're like a top 6 team, but I just think their potential. I think that OGLA and London are also 5 and 6, like I said, and I think they're also top 4, top 6 teams, but I think they're consistently more top 4, top 6 than Florida, so I'm putting Florida at 7. And their roster is possibly in a little bit of flux, so we'll also get into that later. I don't want to touch on that. I have that for another segment. Then at 8, also in that that top 6, top 4, top 8 type of range, I have the Paris Legion. Now, it's been a while since we've seen them play because they didn't play this past weekend, but I think they were overhyped a little bit at the beginning of the year. I'm not trying to downplay them at all, but I think they're a solid team. But once again, I just can't see them winning an event or really making the finals too much. I think they have, I mean, the Australians, Dens, Lucas Shocks, I think are great players. I think Kismet's a great up-and-coming player. I think Zed's an extremely underrated but very inconsistent player. And I think they're a solid team, but I don't see them ever winning an event. And I think they're a team that's ceiling is like a top 4 finish. I don't see them getting to finals, so I have them at 8, and I think they have the least potential of that grouping of OGLA, London, Florida, and Paris, so I put them at 8. And now we get to where I think I'll go over my tiers once I have them all down, but we get to the separate tier, which is 9 and 10, which is teams that seem to have so much potential, but just don't act on that potential. And at 9, I put Seattle, because Octane is an absolute beast at this game. The main AR seems to put up big stats, and obviously if the main AR is putting up big stats, nobody's going to put up bigger stats than Octane because he's probably the best main AR in the world. And he's been putting up crazy stats, but he has no team support. Although Apathy is a guy that picks it up later in games. Karma is a great player who just isn't finding it right now. And Slack is also another great player who just isn't finding it right now. And then who knows what's going on with their 5th player between Pander and Enable and those guys. But they seem to be a team with the best potential among the bottom of the barrel. And they have the best player among the teams in the bottom of the barrel. So I have to put them at 9. Then at 10, once again, we have New York Subliners. I don't understand how this team is bad. Accuracy is a solid main AR. Temp is usually a freak on the map. Zuma and Attach are a duo that always makes a top 4, top 6 team. And then you've got Happy, who, I mean, that's whatever. They dropped Zero, who I think is a fantastic player. We'll get into Zero more later. But New York, once again, who knows what they're doing. They look like a mess on the map, but they have some okay potential because of the star power that they have. So I have to put them at 10 ahead of the other 2 teams we have left. Then at 11, we have the Toronto Ultra. This is just a crapshoot between where you want to put. I think Toronto and LA Gorillas absolutely have to be your bottom 2 teams. I think there's no way around it because New York and Surge have at least established veterans that are successful in the scene. So you can see how they could be in 9 and 10 and maybe move up to the top 8 range for the playoff teams. But Toronto and Gorillas have to be your bottom of the barrel. It doesn't matter what order you put them in. The reason I put Toronto at 11 is because they seem to be more structured. I know that sounds weird because they're the team with 10 players who swaps them in and out every event, so on Call of Duty competitive-like, but at least they have some veterans like Looney and Methods and some okay talented players. They also have Bance, who's kind of a veteran in the scene, I guess you could say. They seem to be a little more structured. They've won some maps. They pushed Chicago to a round 11 game 5 in Atlanta to the brink. They made that map close, or that series close, excuse me. So I think they have a little bit more ability. And then LA Gorillas, an absolute mess. They dropped Aches, which you could say, yeah, it's the right decision because Aches has been pretty bad this whole year. But, I mean, they looked like garbage without Aches. They seem to have the least potential in the league. Vivid and Spart struggled mightily this event. Blast was okay, but also had his struggles. And then you've got Aqua and Decimate, who have been solid, but have also had their struggles. The team just doesn't look good. They seem like they have no idea what they're going to do with their roster, if they're going to bring back Aches, if he's going to swindle his way back into the league. That team is just a mess, so they're in my 12 spot. So there you have it for my power rankings. I'd love for you guys to comment down below and tell me what you think of my power rankings. Are they trash? Are yours similar? Obviously, I'm sure you guys are going to roast me for the Minnesota over Dallas, but like I said, that's interchangeable, and if you have Dallas over Minnesota, I 100% understand. It's not like it's something that I'm really adamant on. Like I am with OGLA being 5, I'm adamant on that, and you guys can argue that with me, but I think my power rankings are probably pretty similar to yours. Like I said, I have tiers. I think Atlanta and Chicago are tier 1 by themselves. I think they're the top 2 clear-cut, best teams, most talented, biggest followings. I think they're the cream of the crop when it comes to the league. Then I have my second tier teams. I think it's only 2 of them. I think it's Dallas Empire and Minnesota ROKKR at that 3 and 4. I think they're the tier 2 where they're like teams that they can definitely win an event, but they're a little bit less likely to win an event than those top 2. They're just a little bit worse, but they're right up there and they can definitely win an event. Then I have OGLA. Actually, I have OGLA and London together. I'm a big fan of London's team. I think those 2 are in like a tier 3 where it's like those teams are going to be consistently top 6 from now on, I believe. And I also think they're actually teams that could win an event. I think they have a very outside chance. I don't think it'll happen, although I think OGLA could move into that tier 2 or even tier 1 by the end of the year, which is maybe controversial, but I think those two are right in there where they're probably not going to win an event, but if they're constantly finishing top 4 and maybe making a couple finals, I wouldn't be shocked. Then in my tier 4, I think I group Florida and Paris together, where I don't see them ever winning an event. I don't think they're going to win an event this year, but I could see them somehow making a run miraculously, maybe to the finals, but I can see them consistently making about semifinals as their top. And then I've got Seattle Surge and New York Subliners in, what is that, like a 5th tier? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, that's the 5th tier I have. I think they're two teams that see a small chance of them figuring it out because of the veteran players on the roster, but they're kind of in a tier where I can't see them making it out of their groups. Maybe their maximum potential would be to make it to the semifinals at absolute maximum. There's no way they're going to win an event at this point unless they make significant roster changes. And then in the 6th tier, the bottom of the barrel, the garbage tier, we have Toronto Ultra and Gorillas. Now, I think Ultra has a little bit of potential to maybe somehow sneak out like an 8 seed and make the playoffs, but they're not very good. And then Gorillas is just the bottom of the barrel. They're not good either, so I have them in that tier. So yeah, comment down below and tell me what your power rankings look like, what your tiers look like, if they're similar to mine. I think most people's would be pretty similar, again, except for maybe the OGLA. But let me know about your power rankings and what yours look like. I think power rankings are kind of a garbage thing to do because they're such a crapshoot. They're so opinion based. But at the same time, now that we're into the year a little more and we've seen each team play 3 events, maybe not events, or if you consider the launch weekend an event, but we've seen them at 3 different venues play matches. We have a little bit more of an understanding of where teams shake out. So I think power rankings are starting to become a little more viable to use. All right. Get a quick drink, and then I'm going to talk about maybe some potential roster changes. All right. So the next segment I wanted to talk about is potential roster changes we might see. Some of these haven't been talked about at all that I know of. Obviously, I'm not a behind-the-scenes person, so some of the ones that I speculate may have been talked about. Some of them I've heard rumors about, and some of them are just my opinions on what I think should happen. So we're going to get into those real quick. And the first one I want to talk about was the New York Subliners picking up Mac Melts to likely replace Happy, I would think it would be. And to me, this move it's okay. It's not life-changing. I still think New York's going to be garbage because for whatever reason, they're not good, even though they have extremely talented players, like I mentioned in Zuma, Attach, Temp. Great players, but for some reason they just haven't pieced it together, and I don't know why that is. But I think that, honestly, as weird as this sounds, and I don't want to be sympathetic to Doug, but I think he gets too much flack around the scene. I kind of feel bad for the guy. He's picked up as a sub, which obviously was probably more for his personality. We know that. But when Happy comes in, Happy doesn't perform. You're the only other substitute on the team. You probably think, wow, a lot of amateurs got picked up. There's not a lot left. It's finally my turn to maybe get a shot and maybe get some scrims in with the team. And if they don't like me, they maybe just want to put me on the starting roster, but at least scrim with me. And nope, he doesn't get that chance. They pick up a guy who's never been proven in the league, Mac Melts, which I don't know a lot about the kid, but I've heard he's a great player. I've heard he's an up-and-comer. I heard he's going to have a future in the league, which I guess that's maybe smart, but I just feel bad for Doug. To me, unless more roster changes are coming for this team, which they could, because I believe they're not in Dallas for the next event, which is 3 weeks away. But I think that it's not a great move for them. I don't think it changes a whole lot unless, like I said, more roster changes come through. But I don't see a way that Zuma, Attach, or Temp are ever dropped because they seem like franchise-type players. So I just don't think this helps them unless the players on the team make significant improvements. It's not a big move for me. And then the next move I want to talk about isn't anything that I've heard is a possibility, but it's one, in my opinion, that could take Florida from that 7 spot I have them in and move them into that 6, that 5, that even maybe 4 spot. And I think that Florida should drop Mox. I guess you can't technically drop a player, but bench Mox. Whenever Pristini's ready to come back, put Pristini back in the starting roster and keep Faro in the starting roster. Now, this may sound controversial because Mox is a pretty established player last year. He was a top AR, probably a top 3, 4 AR last year, but he's not playing the AR role this year. And when you look at this team, they struggle with SMG slaying and keeping up with teams pacing, like Atlanta. And that's why they got smoked by the better teams that they played this event. And I think the fix to that is Mox out the lineup for Pharaoh, because in this game, it would be perfect if there were 2 ARs, because Mox is a slow AR, Skies is a slower AR. It'd be perfect if those two were both on the team and could play an AR role. But in this game, almost every map, you're running 4 SMGs, and Mox is just way too slow of a player and not that good with the SMG, so he doesn't fit on the team. And now I've heard the argument when I was talking to my roommate and other friends about this, that, well, you've got to keep Mox, because what if the AR shifts like it did in Ghosts, where you might need more of a long-range player. I mean, obviously in Ghosts it didn't shift to more ARs, but you know what I mean, a meta shift that could bring forth more ARs. Let's say, like, kind of like in Black Ops, I almost want to say Black Ops 5 because of the possible upcoming game, but Black Ops 4, where there was a main AR, which was an ICR, then there was a submachine gun, which was a SOG, and then there was a flex type of gun, which is the Maddox. And, like, let's say, like, the Kilo in this game gets buffed and is now viable and becomes like a flex type of gun. You might say, like, well, you want Mox for that. But no, if you have Pharaoh on your roster, Pharaoh is known as an AR flex type of player, so he could just play the flex. Skies could stay on your main AR, and then Pristini is a submachine gun player. Havoc's obviously a submachine gun player. And then the other player on that team, God, like, who is it? I can't even think of it right now. It'd be Pharaoh, Havoc, Pristini, Skies, and Frosty. Frosty is also a guy that could play. He played a Maddox all of last year. He could play a flex if you wanted him to. So the idea that if it went to more of an AR heavy game, you'd still have 2 other players in the team along with Skies in Pharaoh and Frosty, who I think are both better players than Mox, who would be able to use an AR. So that's not much of a question. But I think this team cannot keep up in the slaying department with the top teams, and that's why you'll never see them get over the hump unless they make this roster change. So in my opinion, whenever Pristini is back, obviously you don't want to rush him back. He's got to figure out his situation first. But whenever Pristini is back, you need Pristini, Pharaoh, Havoc, and Frosty on the submachine guns, and then Pharaoh or Frosty can flex, whatever. And then Skies on the AR. And I think with Skies slaying, Pharaoh slaying, Havoc slaying, Pristini slaying, even Frosty slaying, that instantly makes this team, the Pharaoh for Mox switch, just the fast pace that Pharaoh can play at, that makes this team viable to maybe hop from my 7th team in my power rankings up to that 5 or that 6 spot, which doesn't sound like a huge difference. But if they can get to that 4th, 5th spot, that maybe puts them in a range where we see them being more of a team that could get to a finals, could maybe sneak out a win, but is consistently getting out of their group more, and that's getting them more points, and that gets them a playoff spot. And I think overall, that young talent just makes them a little bit better and makes them more of a viable team to compete for championships, and I think that's what you're looking for. You want to make the playoffs, so I think they should make a change, benching Mox, keeping Pharaoh, and then bringing Pristini back whenever he's ready. That's something that I'm really adamant. I think that would make Florida a lot better of a team. Mox may be the IGL, but I think that they have other players in that team like Skies or Pristini, a world champ that could step up and be more of an IGL for the team. They also have good search players. I think Skies is a good search player. I think Pharaoh is obviously a very good search player, so they'd have plenty of shot calling in that. I think it'd make him a lot better. I think that's a pretty popular opinion in the community too, but I don't know. Then, in the third prediction I have is I don't think this trade 1-for-1 would exactly work. I don't know how the roster move would happen, but I think, like I've said from the beginning, I think that London needs to go for 0 hard. I think they need to drop rated and get 0 on the team. This is something I'm adamant on because the 0 rated battle, I don't think they like each other at all, but I've always been on the side of 0. I'm not a huge rated fan. I think rated doesn't fit on the team at all. Granted, I think 0 isn't a great SMG. I think he's always been better on the main AR. I think he's always been better on the main AR than rated. I can't believe rated swindled him into using a sub while he used the main AR in previous games where they teamed together. But I think that 0 should go to London, and that would fix their problem, because it seems like London isn't going to pick up a player that's not like a UK or European-based player, because it seems like that's kind of the thing that they want to do with their team, which in my opinion is really cool. I think it would kind of, like, Paris doesn't have any French players. They have Bregy on the bench, who's a French player, which kind of sucks in my opinion. I think it'd be cool if Paris had an all French team because I'd kind of fit the brand more instead of having a bunch of Australians and NA players. But that's whatever. But I think it's really cool that London has an all European team. I think that just keeps the league more interesting rather than having all North American players where it would get kind of boring. I think them representing their home country or close to it is something that's really cool and gives the fans over there. I know if I was from the UK or from Europe, I would really want to support the London team most likely. And I think it's really cool that they're actually like homegrown players from that area, even if they're not from the UK, they're from close or from Europe. Which I mean, if they're from Europe, it's closer to the UK than the US, obviously. So I think that's really cool to see them. Hopefully keep that trend alive. And I think Zero, I've always been on this train that Zero is a way better player than Rated. And obviously you're not going to take Wuskin out of the main AR role to put Zero there because Wuskin has been very, very, very good. A top player on the M4 this year. But I think getting Zero in there might make the vibes better. I think Rated can be toxic at times. And then I think a team with Zero Scraps, Wuskin as like a core three, and then Dylan and Jerd if they play up to the potential. I think that team has crazy potential. Jerd and Dylan can match each other's pace, play super fast on the sub. Then you can have Scraps on the MP5 kind of bait and just slay out and play really well. And you can have Zero in that flex role where he can use ARs on certain maps where he maybe would be a little more comfortable, but also he can play a slower submachine gun to maybe look over his teammates and maybe play more similar to an AR, and then got Wuskin on the main AR. I think that team, I think I'd move London possibly into my top 4 after a few events with that team. I think they could get a lot better. I think that's a move that needs to happen. London needs to get Zero in place of Rated. Somehow make it happen. I don't think they can make a trade because I don't think New York wants Rated. But however they can get it with Zero on the bench, London needs to get Zero. All right. Then going into the next roster change, potential roster change, my thoughts on it. It'd be LA Gorillas. Should they keep Vivid and Spart? To me, this team is chalked. I think this team is screwed. I think they're done for the year. I don't think they're making the playoffs. That seems really early to make a bold prediction like that, but I just think I think they made a huge mistake benching Lacefield. I think Lacefield is a fantastic entry player. I think he has crazy aggression, unlike most players that we've seen. I've always been high on Lacefield ever since I watched him beat Optic at BO3 Champs. I think he's a heck of a talent. I think he's a heck of a player. I think benching him was a mistake. Vivid and Spart, I saw both drop like 0.75 KDs or less this event, and KD's not everything, but considering they were supposed to be fast-paced, slaying type players, like I heard from, I believe it was Crowder on hardpoints, they didn't do that job at all. Granted, it was their first event, so we got to cut them some slack, but they didn't do that job at all. They had a 0.7, just like Aches did in the first 2 events. And at least with Aches' 0.7, he's leading the team and is a smart player and helps them to get wins in search. They won 2 maps in the first series and then got smoked. They won 2 maps on the weekend. I don't think it really matters if they keep them. I think that they should have never benched whoever you want to pick up, Vivid or Spart, whoever you were higher on. I think you should have picked up one of them, maybe put in Blast for Aches, and then kept Lacefield in the lineup. I think this team is just overall chalked. I don't really think it matters if they keep them. I guess if you had to ask me, I'd say keep Vivid and Spart in the lineup because I don't think if you put Aches back in for one of them, I don't think you get that much better. I don't think you make the playoffs still. But I do think if Vivid and Spart are young guns that you think are really good potential players, I think making them like your franchise players, I'm okay. I was going to say like a Simp and a BZ duo, but obviously they're nowhere near the talent of Simp and a BZ, but something, you know what I mean, something like that, a young duo that maybe you think you can build around, because I think Decimate's a really solid piece to build around, and I think Aqua as a main AR is a really solid main AR. I mean, the dude's been, I think, top 3 at Champs in BO3, he was top 2 at Champs in AW, he's just a really solid AR that's always going to slay for you. So I think keeping Aqua and Decimate as building blocks, and then if you think Vivid and Spart are a young duo that could be the franchise pieces for your team, I think you keep them in the lineup, because I think this team's chalked anyways. I don't think they're making the playoffs. So putting Vivid and Spart in the lineup for the rest of the year, see what you got in them. Maybe they become franchise players. Maybe they prove me wrong and they absolutely carry this team like a Simp and a BZ duo, and they're able to get this team to the playoffs. I don't think they're anywhere near as good as Simp and a BZ, obviously, but maybe they show potential. Maybe they become your franchise players. I'd say keep them in, whatever. All right, and then the possibility of Enable subbing in for JCap is the next thing I want to talk about. Now, I don't think this is an essential thing that needs to happen. As you obviously saw, I'm pretty high on OGLA. I think that they are a top 5 team now. I think they have potential to be a top 3 team, a top 2 team, a top 1 team by the time the year is over. So I don't know if they need to sub out JCap. He actually played a lot better this weekend. He obviously had a negative, I think he had like a 0.8 in hardpoint or something like that. But JCap's never going to have like a 1.1, 1.0 higher. He runs the smoke. He runs the trophy. He doesn't run dead silence. His job is to slide in first. He's never going to have a positive KD like somebody like a BZ or Envoy do in that role where they slide in first, because those guys are just freaks of nature. JCap's a solid player, obviously very smart, but he doesn't have the gun skill to be an entry player dropping a 1.1. But I think subbing and enable for him could do the team wonders, because I think the vibes might be off on the team. But I think that maybe more as a slasher and dashy kind of clash. I know TJ's team was slasher before, so I think he should be fine with him. JCap's team with him before, so he should be fine. And Kenny's team with slasher before, so he should be fine. I just think dashy might be kind of clashing with him, but I think maybe TJ being good friends with dashy could talk to him and get that to work out, maybe get them on the same page. And I think finally them switching roles in slasher, convincing dashy to switch to his sub while he plays the main AR, maybe it was like a kind of come to Jesus moment for him, if you will, where they kind of figured out like, hey, if we want to win, we got to do this. We got to put aside our differences. You run this. And then Dashy saw extreme success in the role. So maybe he was like, okay, Austin, Slasher was right. This was the right thing for the team, and we're better for it. So maybe the vibes are good now. Maybe they don't need to get rid of Cap. I don't think Cap was maybe the cause of the bad vibes anyways. But I don't think the team believes in Cap, I'll be honest. I think last year with the team with Crim and Karma were kind of both struggling last year, for being honest. But I think for most of the year, like the young guys like Dashy and TJ actually believed that Crim and Karma were still like the GOATs, like they always said. And like I still think they believed in them, that they could get it done. Even if they didn't get it done, I think they believed, which that's a huge part of Call of Duty. Is I know like when I'm playing with like the squad I play with in competitive, one of my friends, Brock, is probably the best player among the 5 of us. And every time that he's behind me and I'm going to slide in a point, I 100% trust him. If I slide in and I'm only able to pick up 1 kill, I know he's got my trade. I have faith in him to pick up a 2-piece, and I think he's going to do that. And that's the thing. I play with the people that I play with, Brock, Josh, Bryce, and Jorge, are the 4 main people I play with. And every single one of them, I trust them to get my trade. Now, obviously, we're not playing at a pro level. None of us are as good as the pros. We don't play people that are as good as the pros. But it's kind of the same idea, because the people that we're playing are at our skill level, just like the people in the pro level are all at each other's skill level. When we're playing like GBs or tournaments or ranked play, competitive play, I always trust every single person on that team that if I slide in front of them, they're going to get my trade. And that's a huge part of Call of Duty, is if you trust that you can slide in front of somebody and they're going to get your trade, you're going to be more confident in your gunfight. You have a better chance to win it with your confidence. You're probably going to make a smarter play, because if you're not second guessing your teammates, you're just going to make the right play and not think about it. But if you're second guessing, if Dashy's sliding in front of JCap because he's the first one to the hill, and in the back of his mind he's thinking, well, Cap's not going to get my trade, he's not going to pick up, after I bait for him, he's not going to pick up the 2-piece, then Dashy might not slide in at the right time, he might make the wrong play, and then nobody picks up those 2 kills that they needed, and then it doesn't work. But I think maybe subbing an Enable for JCap. I think Enable at this point in their careers has a little more gun skill than JCap. I think the COD intelligence isn't too much different between Enable and JCap. I think that they're both extremely intelligent players, but I think Enable's gun skill is just a little bit better. And I think that little bit better could allow Dashy and Tej and Kenny and the young guys to maybe trust Cap more. And I know Slasher maybe doesn't even trust Cap, because I remember Slasher was so pissed after IW champs. He said he never teamed with Cap again because Cap costed him so bad. He was so bad at the game. I think that maybe with Enable behind them, they might trust him a little more, and that trust might go a long way. They might start to make a little bit better, more sound Call of Duty plays, and maybe it could lead to a better overall team. Now, I don't think this is, like, I think that the Zero change and the Pharaoh change is a must. I think by no means this is a must. I think Cap could easily stay on the team, and they could easily be successful and win with him and win a championship, multiple championships, because Cap just wins. The dude just finds a way to win when everybody's criticizing him. So I think there's no doubt in my mind they can still easily win with Cap. But I think maybe the Enable change would be something to explore, possibly. And I don't know how that would work, because I don't think Seattle, when they're struggling to slay, would want to pick up JCap to be the solution to that. He's not known to be a slayer anymore. But I think exploring Enable to possibly sub in for OGLA is a decent idea. And then the last potential roster change or roster I want to discuss is, what the heck do the Seattle Surge do? And to be honest, I don't know the answer to this question. You've got Octane. Looks like a beast. One of the best players in the game. And then you've got Pander. He looked all right, but I don't know if he's a long-term solution. You've got Karma, Mr. Three Rings, the GOAT, who doesn't look great this year, but I find it hard. You just don't drop Karma. It's just not something you do. We saw what happened in World War II when Optic dropped him, so I don't think the answer is to get rid of him. Then you've got Apathy, who, like I said in Black Ops 4, you can't drop him, even though they did. You can't drop him because he always ends up turning up. And then at Champs, I know they got like EG got top 16 or whatever, but Apathy was an absolute beast at Champs. He was popping off. Apathy's a late game player, so it's really hard to drop him. So I think you've got a core three of Octane, Karma, and Apathy. But then you got Slacked. You think, wow, Slack's struggling, we should drop him. But it's really hard to drop Slacked. He gets absolutely destroyed by the community all the time because they think he's garbage. But the dude wins a championship every year. He's top 4 consistently, so it's hard to drop him. So the odd man out again is like Enable or Pander. Now it's Pander. What the heck do you do though? What players out there, like if Zero's in the bench, do you pick up Zero's and doesn't like the submachine gun role this year? It's hard to pick up Zero. You don't really want to pick him up and throw him in a role that he doesn't really like. I don't think you want to do that. And then you got like Rated. I don't want to pick up Rated to play the SMG role. I don't think he does anything. What, you got Doug out there? I don't know if you want to pick out Doug. You got like, do you pick up like Saints? I don't know if Saints goes with this team well because I don't know how well he gets along with the players, but he's kind of known as a toxic player. I think maybe the only solution for them would maybe be to go after like Lacefield or Saints to play a really aggressive sub to maybe help the slaying, and then he can play fast Apathy and Lacefield. I'd say Lacefield over Saints. Apathy and Lacefield can play really fast. Then you have slower players like Slacked and Karma behind them with the subs, and then you've got Octane on the main AR. I just have no idea what this team should do. I just don't think Pander's the answer. I think maybe you get rid of Slacked, but at the same time, Slacked and Octane are a duo that has been together forever. They always seem to find a way to win when they were under Rise, when they were under LG as well. I don't know what the heck this team does. I think they have to keep Karma, Apathy, and Octane, obviously. I think you can maybe switch out Slacked and Pander. I think you have to switch out Pander for like a Lacefield type player, a better, more aggressive SMG, because that team needs slaying. Octane's slaying, but nobody's helping him. I think Apathy will get there eventually, but he's a late in the cycle of the game player. I don't know what the heck that team does. I just think they need some kind of a change, but I don't think you drop Karma, Apathy, or Octane. That's my big thing. Maybe not Slacked either, but those three, you got to keep that core three and do something. I just don't know what it is. And this podcast is going kind of long, but the last thing I want to talk about before or after a quick water break here is my 5 big takeaways from the weekend. I'll try to keep them short and sweet. All right. So my 5 big takeaways. I think the first one I want to address is the ROKKR are elite. Like I said, they were. I touched on it enough, so I won't go into great detail, but I think the ROKKR are an elite team. I think they have the potential to win any event that they're at. I think they've been extremely underrated by everybody in the community this year. Going into the year when we saw the rosters form, me and my roommate kind of did a prediction of where we thought they would be. I said I think the ROKKR are going to be a really, really solid team with the potential to win events, and I think that they've proven that. I think the ROKKR are elite, and they deserve to be talked about as a top 4 team definitively, maybe even top 3. I think they're an elite team. I think they're going to continue to be an elite team. I think they're going to fight for a top spot in the playoffs. I think they're going to fight for championships for this year, and I think that they have a very good chance to win a championship this year. Another big takeaway I have that I kind of touched on already again is Seattle is absolutely chalked and needs to make some roster changes. Like I said, keep that core 3, and I think they need to make some kind of change with Pander for some kind of big trade for like a big slaying star, maybe a young gun, somebody that's just absolutely cracked and can push on the map and up their pacing. Maybe if Pharaoh gets removed from the Florida roster, they pick up Pharaoh in place of Pander just to try to bring some more slaying with him, but I think that roster is absolutely chalked, and I think it needs to make some sort of a change, or they need to have a heart-to-heart and really figure out what's going on there, and they need to get it figured out because that roster is too talented to be this trash. My next take is New York might be the biggest mess of a franchise in the league right now. I'm kind of going at some teams right now, but I think it's necessary. They need kind of a kick to get them jump-started. I think New York is the biggest mess, like I touched on way earlier in the podcast. You sign Doug, he's a huge name. You probably mostly signed him to be a content creator, but then you put in your other sub. He doesn't play well. You lose both matches with him. Then you've got Doug, next man up. Nope, you sign an amateur instead of letting Doug have a chance. I think they're a mess. I think that the team, Chem, with guys like Accuracy and Temp, who didn't seem to get along last year on Splice, so I don't know why they teamed again, but I think this team's probably clashing. Zuma and Attach are no strangers to voicing their opinion. Temp is no stranger to voicing his opinion. Accuracy is stubborn and likes to voice his opinion. Zero probably was the odd man out that didn't voice his opinion as much, and he got kicked off for it, I'm sure, or clashed with the wrong person and got kicked off because he's the one guy that's not great friends with everybody else in the team. So it sounds weird, but maybe there was some truth behind what Censor's dad said. Obviously, it wasn't a good thing to say. It probably screwed over Censor's chances, and that's why Matt got signed. But I think that they're the biggest mess of a team. And now I think 3 weeks from now, they could be an amazing team because they have Zuma, Attach, and Temp, who I think are supremely talented players. But right now, they're a mess, and they've got to figure it out. They're so talented. I love Temp, Zuma, and Attach. I think they're amazing players. I think Accuracy is another great player. Keep forgetting to mention him, but he's a great player. But they need to figure it out. Happy's not the answer. I don't know if Mac is the answer. I don't know if Doug is the answer. But they've got to figure it out. They're the biggest mess of a franchise in the league right now, and probably one of the most popular teams. They've got to figure it out. They just have to. They're extremely popular. They're extremely talented, and they just aren't playing well. And I want to see them be successful. I love all the guys on that team. I think they're extremely talented. They're a mess, though. That's a big takeaway from this weekend for me. New York is a mess. The next take I have is also something I kind of addressed. OGLA are coming for the top. I think within the next month, OGLA might be cracking the top 3. I think you can make an argument they've already cracked the top 4, possibly. I don't think that argument has a lot of foundation since we've only seen one event. That's why I put them at 5. But I think by the end of, let's see, we're in March now. Maybe by the end of March. I guess not by the end of March because the next event isn't until like the last weekend of March. So by the end of April, maybe the mid-April, I think we might see ourselves, because we have like from March 28th and 9th, and I think 2 straight more weeks after that. There's three events. I think by the end of that string of 3 events, we might have OGLA, or maybe even after one of those events or 2 of those events, we're gonna have OGLA as a top 4 team. I think they're coming for the top. Now that's a hot take and could be completely proven wrong, and they might lose the rest of the matches like they were earlier. But I think they're coming for the top. I think they're extremely talented, and if they make that enable roster change, they might even shoot up to the top quicker. My last hot take, kind of a more heartfelt note for the league, is I think this league is going to be a great success with a better Call of Duty title. I think that this weekend finally, I mean, I don't play this game a ton just because I don't love it. I hate the spawns in the game. I hate squad spawning. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I hate when I think I have a spawn blocked and somebody spawns behind me. And yet I'm still extremely entertained by the game. I love the storylines of COD. I love competitive COD, and that might be the reason why I'm more entertained by the league. So I think that this league is going to be a great success, and I think with a better title, like I think if it would have launched with Black Ops 4, it would have been even more of a roaring success. And I think next year, if it's Black Ops 5, Black Ops, whatever they're going to call it, if it's a Treyarch game, I think the league is going to explode next year with how popular it's going to be. I think it's going to be one of the top esports, especially in North America, obviously, because Call of Duty is very popular in North America in comparison to a lot of esports. And I think it's going to be the premier console esport, obviously, because there aren't too many other console esports besides like sports games. I think it's going to be a top tier league. I think the production value, while the days can get a little long and they can have some screw ups, they're learning. It's only the 3rd event. I think the production value on the league is great. I think the commentators, I talk about this with my roommate all the time. I think the casting duos in the CDL are the best in esports overall with the depth that they have and how good they are. I think that Maven and Merc are maybe the top casting duo in esports. That's a hot take, but I think they are amazing. Maven keeps everything so entertaining. Merc is great on the analysis. They're great together. And then you've got probably the number 2 duo that most people would say, Benson and Chance. Benson, another great play-by-play type of guy, brings the hype, always a great caster. And then another analyst in Chance, who wasn't that well known really before Black Ops 4 is when he really got onto the main stage and cast with Benson a lot. A great analyst. He just knows what he's talking about all the time, and he presents it in a good way, and he's not afraid to go at teams a little bit, which I kind of like. He's not afraid to tell them when they're doing something wrong, and he's another great analyst. And then how many esports have a 3rd casting duo that's elite? I think Miles and Momo are actually my 2nd favorite, almost my favorite casting duo. I think they are amazing. I think Momo knows the game well. I think he's a great analyst type of guy. He's able to bring the game and help you understand it a lot, and he's got a great voice. And I think Miles is the most underrated caster in esports. I think Miles is um, like a European courage. I think he brings the hype. I think he's entertaining. I think he's a personality that we could see if he went into the streaming space absolutely blow up. I don't know how good he is at games, but I think he's a streamer that would blow up like Courage if he would have gone onto like the Fortnite train early like Courage did. I think Miles is the most underrated caster in CDL. I think he could even maybe be up at the top of esports as a caster. I think he is elite. So I think those three duos, if they stay together, are going to carry this league. The production value is going up. And overall, I think this league is going to be a great success as we get more and more better Call of Duty titles, because I don't think it's going to get a whole lot worse than Modern Warfare. And overall, that's kind of my thoughts on current rosters, the CDL LA event. I didn't get into any predictions for the next event because that's still about 3 weeks out, and I'm going to save that for a different episode. But unfortunately, that is also 3 weeks out, so that means it probably would be 2 weeks until another episode of the podcast. But I'm thinking I might do like an emergency pod at some point in between then and now to maybe discuss if roster changes happen or if trades happen, or I might do like a special edition with my roommate or somebody else in like a throwback episode, and maybe we talk about like a different COD, or maybe debate who the best dynasty in COD is, or who we think the best roster is, or what's a dream roster we'd build in like a certain game, or something like that. Some kind of special episode that'd be fun to talk about. I think it'd be good content. I want to get more content on. I don't want to wait 3 weeks till the next podcast. But we'll see. We'll see if I want to make some kind of episode like that. I think that'd be a cool thing to do. Some kind of cool content to create. But that's my plans for the next few weeks. I think this was a good podcast. I went a lot longer than I did in the first one because I was just really into what I was talking about. And this is going to go up on YouTube again. I'm going to try to get it up on SoundCloud, and I'd really appreciate if you guys would check it out wherever you can. I'm working on getting it on Spotify right now because I know that's where I listen to most of my podcasts. That's where I listen to Hard Points and the Codcast and all those. I'm trying to get it on Spotify right now, so hopefully that'll be there for you guys soon. But if you're watching this on YouTube, I would very, very, very much appreciate it if you would drop a like, drop a comment on your thoughts on anything I said. If you think I said something I said was dumb, if you agreed with something, if you just want to have a friendly debate about something, if you thought, oh, I missed a point on this, or I could improve this, that'd be great if you commented that. I'd love, obviously, if you subscribe to help support the channel, help get the podcast some more exposure. But yeah, leave a like, comment, subscribe, whatever you want to do. Follow it on Spotify, follow it on SoundCloud, follow the podcast on YouTube. Look forward to possibly more like special edition type of shorter episodes, shorter videos coming out on the YouTube channel, hopefully in between now and the next event, since it is a bit of a break. I really enjoyed talking about this one. Hopefully you guys enjoy listening to it. And I think this is a pretty good episode. I hope you guys continue to support. I really appreciate the support. And until the next episode, I will see you guys there.